let's get into Leech Lake and let's talk about some presentation, some fishing stuff.
Let's tell Murph spots.
Well, that's what I was kind of hoping. Maybe he took his own profile off because he's worried that somebody's like getting into his graph from the website or something.
Boy.
Hacker.
Yeah, Frito.
Yep.
Talk about your go-to presentation. Talk about things to look for. What you're looking for, fishing opener, everything else. Let's talk a little bit about fishing.
Well, I think in this time of year, it's obviously bait's big. So you really want to identify those areas where the shiners are going to be, because that's the bait of choice, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be able to have some in our boats, use them. I mean, it sounds like could be interesting, the bait situation. So keep that in mind when you're, thinking about bait here. Obviously the spot tail shiner is always number one. Jig and a spot tail, it's tough to beat, but, from a presentation standpoint, I think obviously you got to go with your confidence. Jeff's got a confidence jig. Toby's got a confidence jig. I've got one. It's probably going to be the first thing you toss out there.
What's your confidence jig?
Long shank of some sort. And then if I do that, it'd probably be a stand-up after that. So I think that's the one thing people forget about with jigs is the different profiles create different actions. And it's, the more you think about it, the more I learn about walleye fishing and the better you can learn a lot from these bass people, because, think about bass guys and how they'll throw something out there, then that didn't work, but then just something subtly different that has a different action could sometimes be the triggering mechanism. And I think jigs can work the same way, whether it's your cadence, how you're swimming it, or just the profile of it. Like I've watched Jeff enough, and he's put on a clinics in front of me, just throwing out a stand-up jig, but he's got it figured out, and that's your confidence jig. And I think, you got to think about how you're going to fish for walleyes. On leech, wind is the key on leech, and so when you get wind, you can oftentimes make your drifts and work areas over, and you can snap jig and you can swim those jigs along. But what happens when it goes flat calm? And that's where, I always chuckle when I'm on leech and you see people who, that goes back to me again. Like, I don't want to be complacent as a fisherman, but you watch people sometimes they could be blowing 5 miles an hour and they throw their drift sock out and they're going like 0.1 and their jig is straight down. And I'm like, it's clear body of water. It's not going to work, and so that's when you got to think outside the box. And so when you're on leech, whether you're pitching jigs, getting it all away from the boat. And I think a lot of times, I think what works for me a lot of times when it's flat calm is either pitching to them or getting that thing ways out there and just start ripping it and going and get those reaction bites. And I know I've learned a lot of that, from you and when watching you do those things. And so for me, it's going to be a jig and a minnow. I'm not going to be afraid to have a jig and a plastic.
Heck yeah.
And especially if you get a decent bite.
Yep.
But that also allows you to be super aggressive and super fast and really cover water. And that's going to be my go-to right there. And then, and I think the other thing is if you can find, whether it's on leech, is anytime you can find some current, that's going to be another go-to as well. Your bottleneck areas, current areas, that's going to draw those walleyes this time of year.
Yeah.
So to me, it's finding the shiners in that area, those shallow areas, and it could be 3-4 feet of water, and it could be, depending on the wind, it could be out a little bit deeper. But sure. And then find those current areas from there. I don't think the weeds are going to be up quite, so you're going to have, maybe you can look around for some weed growth too. But
sure.
I'm hoping that, the one normally we guide, Jeff and I guide together on opener, and we've got a big group of whole bunch of guys from all over, and
a Minnesota Viking.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've had multiple NFL players, and it's a fun group of guys, and it just didn't work out this year with COVID and everything. So I'm actually pretty excited about
going in and having fun.
Yeah, and just going to fish some spots on the lake I don't maybe necessarily get to, and just learning something.
I'm going to ask you about rod reel and line combination, but the one thing you talk about COVID, one thing that it's kind of done is we don't do good with complacency, but there's been a little bit of complacency where I may be sleeping until like 7:30 every morning now instead of getting up at 6:30 every morning. I may be staying up till midnight. Like Christine, my wife's a school teacher, and she, like you guys, she's grinding away, but there's a little complacency. And fishing guiding was always, man, I still get anxiety over before I have a trip, and I think that's what makes us good is I'm up double checking to make sure my batteries are charged, and I'm re-rigging my rods. I got to tie that knot one more time, yada, yada, yada.
Shaking down the other guides to see where they're at.
Yes. A little soft shake. Yes.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yes. But this opener, Joe and I are going to go fishing, and there's going to be no agenda. Like, Gavin's going to come with, and we're just going to go have fun. Like, let's just go fishing. So I'm excited about that. I want you to talk about rod, reel, line combination, the whole setup. If you were to choose one for the opener, what would it be, and why would you choose that setup?
Yeah, I'm probably a medium light action rod. It kind of depends on what I'm doing. If I'm pitching, I like to have that little bit more of a lighter action with the softer tip, because it can be a little more forgiving. The walleye picks it up. You can kind of give them the rod tip a little bit. So, a 6'6", 6'9" action. I'm actually kind of excited to try out some of these. I have got a couple of these Elliott rods I'm going to try out this year. So kind of excited to get one of those rigged up and pitch that out. I'm a mono guy, so I'll spool it up, Fluor, Abu Garcia, something, 2500 series reel, 6 pound Berkeley Sensation. That's my go-to. It ties good knots. They're strong. It seems to hold up really well. I've tried the braid thing. If I'm doing plastics, maybe ripping, I'll do the braid, but otherwise I'm a mono guy, I guess. And I know a lot of guys, they get to the braid and the super lines and this and that. Sometimes I think maybe it's because they just don't want to swap line out every year, maybe.
Yeah.
But that, a 6'6", 6'9" action rod, linked rod with a medium light action, with an 1/8 ounce jig. And 6 pound Sensation is going to be my go-to. And I probably got about 7, 8 of them rigged up with about 6 different jigs. And, I think color is a confidence thing when you think about jigs. Mm-hmm. On leech, I think you could probably catch them on about any color you want. But I do think the sun plays a major role when you're picking your colors. Yeah. And, gold is always great when it's sunny out. It always seems to have a little flash or silver of some sort. But
I used gold a lot last year. Parrot was my number one color, but gold was big for me last year. Actually, I used that most. All right, Tobalicious.
Same question.
Same stuff.
Yeah, it's jig and a minnow time. It's shiner minnows and jig and a minnow, and that's the bread and butter. I mean, cross Minnesota. I mean, we grew up in Bemidji, Northland, fishing tackle, fireball jigs, stand up or whatever. Those are tried and true. Jig and minnow. That's the deal. I think the shiner minnow is probably the most important thing. I mean, we can talk about line and rods, and shiner minnow is what those walleyes are chasing. Those shiners now are spawning. They're up in there at chara grass, and they're trying to find a warm place to do their business. And those walleyes have spawned. Now they've been done for over a week, and they're hungry, and they're looking to go in there. And I think most importantly, on opener, it's going to be timing. Timing is everything. Like, you can find the walleyes. I mean, technology nowadays, you can find them side imaging, and you can, or there's a bunch of boats over there and the nets are out. You obviously, there's fish over there, right?
Yeah.
So having the right bait is key, and then how you present your bait. For me, my go-to is blue and white on Leech Lake, blue and white jig, whether it's a stand-up or it's
I hate blue and white.
Well, there you go. So here's what I was going to say, though. Color is the least most important factor to me. It absolutely doesn't matter how far away it is in the boat, the line angle, how much bow is in your line, and how you're popping that jig is absolutely the most crucial component. And making sure your jig is in front of a face. And if they're hungry, it doesn't matter. And if they aren't hungry, then it does matter. And that's the key, is figuring out that cadence. And once you do that, you're going to catch fish. I do believe with the moon phase, we're going into a full moon, and we're going to have cold water. It's going to be cooler. And then with that sun shining down, that noon to 3:30, that's going to be the time to be out. So looking at the wind factors, northwest wind right now, I already got my go-to spot figured out in my head traditionally, right? And I'm going to make sure I'm over there and I'm pitching because it's shallow water. So Leech Lake is clear. You want to make sure you're a ways away, whether it's drifting or you're pitching jigs. That's going to be the key. And like Jason, 6 pound line, I think that Sensation thing's been around a while. I think, Jeff, that's something that you've shared with the boys, and most of the guys do use Berkeley Sensation. And I know I've fallen into that. I've gone complete circle in my life. I was a mono guy. Berkeley XL, Trilene, then XT, the green, and then I went to Power Pro, Fireline, back to Power Pro, tied it with fluorocarbon. And then I was working a trip on Leech Lake the second weekend of the season, which is close to opener. And we were literally fishing under the boat. And the boat next to us was catching more fish than we were. And everybody's fishing below the boat. So does it really matter? Apparently it does. Because when you're using monofilament, you just get a little bit more play out of that jig. It just wiggles. And your minnow's able to move. Fluorocarbon's pretty stiff. So when you get a fluorocarbon leader on there, that's the key. So light line, 6 pound test. I agree. I think these rods are amazing now, and a lot of the rods I too use Elliott's, and they are built specifically for certain actions. And so I was able to get my hands on a 7.3 last year. It's a longer rod. It's a rod that I love to use for rigging. But when you're long lining jigs, 8th ounce, 16th ounce, when it's long lining way out there, they're so sensitive. They're, they're composites, and they have, Syncork technology in there. And so it's like a lightning bolt goes off in your hand when you get a bite. And I love to use that. So the rods, the reels, the line, 6-pound tests, the smaller the better. I would even use 4. I just never tried it. I caught a 4-pound largemouth bass on 4-pound test crappie fishing the other day. Probably should be using that. You can do it. These reels are amazing nowadays, whatever the brand is. And so that's it. Yeah. So 6-pound test. My favorite is Sensation. Anything in that 6.6 to 7.3 light action 2 soft tips. I like that. And then Shiner minnow. That's the key.
It's so funny, the fishing industry is still built to talk around color first. And I've talked about this in the muskie world the most. And I've actually took a little grief over, this you talk to any experienced hardcore fishing guide, they will tell you that color is the last on the spectrum. It does matter at times.
Sure it does.
But it's the last thing that is the most important. The first thing is many things like line angle, water temperature, current, green weeds, jigging cadence, all those main factors.
Yep.
that and we call that nuance. I've always talked about that in the fishing game is that's nuance. Small little subtle details that aren't technically most difficult, and I talk about this with my son in hockey, is learning simple things, being able to do simple things over and over again, because in tight situations, that's when it's going to make a difference. Same thing in the fishing world. Don't put your success on color. Have that in the back of your mind, but put your success on fishing on all those other nuances. Wind, you guys talked about all these things, and I'm like, I'm picking. You're paying attention to wind. You're paying attention to bait clouds. You're paying attention to line angle. You're paying attention to speed, jig speed. How far is my jig away from the boat? Yada yada. All these things that make the difference.
Right.
One thing as a guide, the benefit of being a guide is you often guys get to sit in the back of the boat and kind of watch. Yep. This is a really good piece of advice for people, especially this time of year when you're jigging. I mean, when you're linear rigging, you're just kind of dragging it along and little things you can do linear, but when you're jigging, there's, like you said, the cadence and the line angle and everything. And I just remember last year it was a kind of a flat, calm day, whatever. It was a fishing opener, and I had a 12-year-old kid in my boat, and he was putting on a clinic. The dad and I were catching one here and there, and the kid was putting on a clinic, and I just kept kind of watching it. And the reason why this was a really good tip if you got kids in the boat this weekend early, and because for kids, the whole idea of snap jigging, and just maybe they don't quite get it, but I put just a little fireball jig with a little blade on it, and I thought and then we downsized the minnow, but it was those little things I picked up on and how he was working it, and he was just kind of swimming it through the column, and he was putting 4-1
dunk.
And but those, so you start thinking about the people in your boat and what works, but then just watch the people. If one person's catching the fish, they're doing something different than what other people are doing.
Hear that?
My philosophy, that's the best thing ever. My philosophy is 1 bite's luck, 2 bites a pattern, right? And so do the math. It's a math problem, right? So I totally agree with what you're just saying. In fact, I was going to just expand on that a little bit, but you're spot on. And I have learned so much as a fisherman, tournament fisherman, and everything else through guiding. And it is exactly that. It's having the capacity to pay attention to the details and understand that you don't know everything. And quite honestly, be okay with that.
Yes.
Just expand on it when you learn something. When a light bulb goes off, pay attention and expand on it. And that's the key.
The best anglers in the world, I've always said this, the best angler in the world have the quietest mouth and the biggest ears. Just like Murph. We may tease him a little bit, but those are the best anglers that can sit and listen and pick up on nuance and try it.